Good afternoon. This morning I convened the largest, strongest group of countries yet behind a just and lasting peace in Ukraine. Now, a huge amount has happened since I brought leaders together at Lancaster House here in London. That was just 2 weeks ago. President Zelensky has shown once again, and beyond any doubt, that Ukraine is the party of peace. Vladimir has committed to a 30-day unconditional ceasefire, but Putin is trying to delay, saying there must be a painstaking study before a ceasefire can take place. Well, the world needs action, not a study, not empty words and conditions. So my message is very clear. Sooner or later, Putin will have to come to the table. So this is the moment. Let the guns fall silent. Let the barbaric attacks on Ukraine once and for all stop and agree to a ceasefire now. And let's be clear why this is so important. Russia's appetite for conflict and chaos undermines our security back here at home in the United Kingdom. It drives up the cost of living. It drives up energy costs. So this matters deeply to the United Kingdom. That is why now is the time to engage in discussion on a mechanism to manage and monitor a full ceasefire and agree to serious negotiations towards not just a pause, but a lasting peace, backed by strong security arrangements through our coalition of the willing. And we won't sit back and wait for Putin to act. Instead, we will keep pushing forward. So the group I convened today is more important than ever. It brings together partners from across Europe, as well as Canada, Australia and New Zealand, with backing from others too, including Japan. We agreed we will keep increasing the pressure on Russia, keep the military aid flowing to Ukraine, and keep tightening the restrictions on Russia's economy to weaken Putin's war machine and bring him to the table. And we agreed to accelerate our practical work to support a potential deal. So we will now move into an operational phase. Our militaries will meet on Thursday this week here in the United Kingdom to put strong and robust plans in place to swing in behind a peace deal and guarantee Ukraine's future security. President Trump has offered Putin the way forward to a lasting peace. Now we must make this a reality. So this is the moment to keep driving towards the outcome that we want to see, to end the killing, a just and lasting peace in Ukraine, and lasting security for all of us. Thank you. I will now take some questions, starting with, I think, Hannah from the BBC. Hannah.
Thank you, Prime Minister. You've said now is the time for concrete commitments. Can you give an example of a concrete commitment that has been made this morning? How many countries have indicated they might put troops on the ground, for example? And a second, if I may, you're doing all of this work on what a peacekeeping force might look like. What if Russia simply won't accept one?
Well, let me start from the premise that a lot has happened, obviously, since we had the meeting at Lancaster House just under 2 weeks ago, particularly developments this week in relation to the position of Ukraine. And the group that met this morning is a bigger group than we had 2 weeks ago. There is a stronger collective resolve, and new commitments were put on the table this morning, both in relation to the coalition of the willing in terms of defending the deal, also in relation to the wider point, which is the collective defence and security of Europe. So more commitments on the table this morning, and an agreement that we now move to the operational phase, which is why the talks on Thursday, the military talks, will become the next focal point. There was a wider agreement this morning, which was that the yes but from Russia is not good enough, and that we agreed collective pressure will be put on Russia from all of us who are in the meeting this morning. So I'd say overall we are successfully gathering political and military momentum. I think more widely there was an appreciation this morning that a wider argument that I've been making that goes beyond just the question of Ukraine is that Europe needs to step up in its own defence and security. And so we moved forward on that front today because some of the commitments that were made were beyond simply the coalition of the willing in relation to making sure that we can defend any deal in Ukraine if one is reached, but also a step up for the collective defence and security of Europe, which is a really important part of the argument I've been making about the era that we're now in. In terms of Russia's position, I think it's really important at this point that we put maximum pressure on Russia. This yes but is not good enough, and that's why the collective resolve this morning was to put pressure, and we can collectively put pressure on Russia. There were a lot of countries represented this morning, a very strong collective resolve. And so I think we've made real progress this morning, and that momentum and that resolve by a number of countries and making sure we continue to be forward-leaning is really important. Thank you very much. I've got Harry from ITV.
Thank you, Prime Minister. What you haven't mentioned today is a US security backstop. Have you concluded that Donald Trump isn't prepared to provide a security backstop? And do you think this coalition of the willing can defend Ukraine without the support of the US? And secondly, if I may, you've talked about a full ceasefire agreement. At the moment, President Putin is suggesting he's not willing to agree to a 30-day ceasefire. What hope have you got of getting a long-term lasting peace?
Well, look, firstly, the position on the US hasn't changed. I've been clear that it needs to be done in conjunction with the United States. As I think you know, we are talking to the US on a daily basis. My NSA was over there yesterday, I just arrived back this morning. So the position on the doing this in conjunction with the United States hasn't changed, and that's why we're having the detailed discussions that we are. On your wider challenge, that Putin is saying yes, but we need to get him to yes and get round the table. And I do believe we can apply collective pressure to that end. 2 weeks ago, I was challenged on whether we'd even get as far as we've got now. We have moved forward, and that is good. We now need to move forward again. And I think that having a collective resolve, which is a demonstration of the sort of momentum that we're building up now, political momentum, which is important to keep many allied countries on the same page, but also the military momentum, which will go into Thursday's meeting now, which is very much an operational planning meeting. Thank you very much. Sam from Sky.
Sam Coates, Sky News. Prime Minister, I'm struggling to work out what the coalition of the willing actually does on the ground. As far as I understand it, UK troops couldn't fire at Russian troops. If Russian troops opened fire, we couldn't retaliate, and nor could anybody else, because of what that would provoke. So is it just some kind of slightly more tepid training mission in reality? What's the basis on international law? What's the remit? And why couldn't the UN be involved?
Well, the operational meeting is where the discussions are taking place as to what the capabilities will be. I've indicated a willingness for the United Kingdom to play a leading role in this, and indicated that if it's necessary, that will be troops on the ground and planes in the sky. There are different capabilities from different countries, but those are the operational discussions that are going on in relation to what this coalition of the willing will be able to provide. But obviously, we've got to get a deal first, so there's the pressure that needs to be put on to Russia to get around the table, to get the deal. Then there's a question of a ceasefire for a possible short period, and then the lasting peace that we need to see. But if there's going to be lasting peace, there's going to have to be security arrangements. I've been clear and unwavering about this, because we know from history, recent history, that a deal without security arrangements is not something which Putin respects. And therefore, it's in all of our interest to make sure the security arrangements are robust enough to defend the deal and to hold the peace. Otherwise, we'll repeat the history of recent years where Putin will breach the line again. Thank you. Caroline from the Sun. Caroline from the Sunday, Caroline from the Sunday Times.
Prime Minister, the Russian leader has said his nation needed guarantees before it would consider the 30-day ceasefire, and later urged Ukrainian troops in the Kursk region to surrender. Given the obvious advantage to Putin of a delay, what are the pressures that you can now use to bring Russia to the table? You've talked in your statement about sanctions. Are you now willing to seize those frozen Russian assets? And also, what is your message to President Trump about the urgency of the situation now, that he must be part of the coalition to bring Putin to the table?
I think there are 2 points of pressure. The first is more military capability for Ukraine, and fresh commitments put on the table this morning in that regard. So this group is moving forward on that. That's short-term military capabilities and longer-term military capabilities, because we also see Ukraine playing its own part in any security arrangements, which is very important. In terms of the sanctions, yes, we want to tighten the sanctions still further, and we discussed this morning how much further we can go, including the question of frozen assets. That is a complicated question, as I think everybody appreciates. So we discussed further sanctions that have got nothing to do with the assets, which we will take forward as a result of this morning's discussion, but also a continuing discussion about what more can be done on the assets themselves. Thank you. Mikey from the Sunday Mirror.
Hi, Prime Minister. There's a possible, perhaps even likely scenario where Vladimir Putin doesn't come to his senses, where he continues putting unreasonable demands on any ceasefire, on any negotiated settlement, perhaps doesn't even come to the table at all. And in that scenario, we can't be certain that Donald Trump is going to side with us and not with him. What's plan B?
Well, firstly, we need to put Ukraine in the strongest possible position for whatever comes next, which has been my consistent position, whether that's around the table, which is what I hope it will be in negotiations, or if that doesn't come to pass. Secondly, on the US and Caroline, I'm sorry, you also asked me about the US. We are obviously talking to the US every day about what happens next. I am clear in my own mind that President Trump is absolutely committed to the lasting peace that is needed in Ukraine, and everything he's doing is geared towards that end. I'm also absolutely clear that the relationship between the UK and the US is the closest of relationships between allied countries, has been for decades and will continue to be for many years ahead. So that's the base on which we're planning. But it is important and reinforces why we need as many countries as possible thinking together, discussing together and moving forward together as a group, which is what we've achieved this morning. Thank you very much. I've got Dan from Politico.
Hello, Prime Minister.
Dan.
Former White House advisor Fiona Hill, who's working on your defence review, believes that there's going to be a proliferation of countries seeking to obtain nuclear weapons as a result of the combination of what President Putin is doing and the fact that they think that they can no longer rely on the US to come to their aid. So, do you believe that's going to happen? What do you think you can do to prevent it? And if I may, given PIP benefit is not linked to work, how do you square making PIP harder to claim with your stated aim of getting people into work?
Well, on the question of nuclear weapons, obviously our position is that we will do everything we can to prevent any increase in the availability of nuclear weapons. That's been a very clear and consistent position of this government and, to be fair, of previous governments in the United Kingdom. So that remains our position. Look, on welfare, I've made the principles clear enough. We need to support those who need support and to protect them, but at the same time we need to make sure that we support and protect those who need to and are able to get into work, which the current arrangements don't, I don't think, adequately do, and that's why it's important that we make the case for reforming welfare, which is what we're doing. And I've got Anna from the Mail on Sunday.
So the examples of pressure you've given, Prime Minister, are things that the UK has done before and to date, and they don't seem to be working considering the Kremlin's response. How are you concerned about that, and is there anything you're going to do to ensure that that pressure is actually more effective, perhaps? Donald Trump has just announced specific travel bans for Russian nationals included. Is that something you're considering?
Well, look, firstly, the effect of the sanctions on the Russian economy have been pretty profound. We shouldn't underestimate the impact that they've already had. And by doubling down and increasing the sanctions, that will cause even more pressure and pain on the Russians, in combination with what President Trump is indicating would be the consequences as he sees it and the action that he proposes to take. So that's quite a combination. On the question of Putin's position of yes, but we need to move that. But just as I stood here in London 2 weeks ago saying we need to move forward, we need to make progress, so I say it again, I don't accept that things are frozen as they are today and that no party can now be moved forward. I don't accept that for a minute. I think that if we apply pressure, we show collective resolve and some clear-eyed leadership on this, we can move this forward to get the parties round the table for negotiations. And what then needs to come out of that is the just and lasting peace that everybody wants, not least the Ukrainians, and which is very important to the defence and security of Europe, and very important to the United Kingdom, because the impact of what happens in Europe always washes up on our shores, and it's already impacted us quite profoundly in the last 3 years. And that's why I think it's always important to appreciate that what's happening internationally is having a huge impact on us domestically. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you.